What's up guys, today we're going to be doing a review on the 1985 film The Breakfast Club. For your cast you've got Judd Nelson as John Bender, Molly Ringwald as Claire Standish, you've got Ali Sheedy as Alison Reynolds, you've got Anthony Michael Hall as Brian Johnson, you've got Emilio Estevez as Andrew Clark, you've got Paul Gleason as Richard Vernon, you've got John Kapelos as Carl Reed, and that's pretty much all I'm going to cover in this review because I don't see really the point of covering the parents of each of the Breakfast Club, because they're only in it briefly. So let's get into the review itself. But before we do that, let's get into the plot. 5 high school students, all in different places on the high school popularity spectrum, face detainment in their school library on a Saturday morning. As time passes by, their egos fade and they become close buddies. Right, okay, so as for what I think, right, I think everyone in the cast puts in a great performance. I think everyone flourishes in their role perfectly. But some characters in particular require a little bit more TLC than others, such as Judd Nelson as John Bender and Ali Sheedy as Alison Reynolds, and I think they're absolutely starfire in this movie. So Judd Nelson as John Bender, he had a lot of intense and nuanced demeanour that he absolutely nails, dealing with such a complex, highly energetic character that exudes a lot of emotion, just as poignant and strenuous as the other. This character requires a nurtured performance that you really can't successfully do sluggishly, because this character, whenever he's on screen, he's like high octane in everything he does. He's funny, he's serious, he's vulnerable, he's intimidating, he's brash, he's childish, he's invasive, he's overreactive, and it requires like such, huge fluctuation in his current emotion. Not just that, but you also got to hold it together in terms of your facial expressions as well, and that's done effortlessly as well. So yeah, really good. And you have to do it in the particular definitive way, for John's character, because of how he is and what his personality is and stuff like that. And it's really good. He never skips a beat. He's so on point every single time. So Judd does this in a very memorable and commendable way. Exceptional performance from him. Now let's talk about Ali Sheedy as Alison Reynolds. Honestly, the exact same goes for her too, with her specific character traits. She was really good at playing the quiet, outcasted loner character when she didn't speak, which of course for the majority of scenes she's in she doesn't. She usually communicated everything with her eyes and her facial expressions to give her own views on the events relaying in front of her, which simultaneously tells you also that she's a little unstable sometimes in her face, or with her eyes tweaking, or her really unnatural movements. And then when she does speak, there's also a lot of unnerving tone. It's sharp, it's fast, it's blunt. But it can be one of anguish, of sadness, of vulnerability, which of course all tie into the identity of this character overall, so it makes sense. And Ellie really made this character her own. I mean, only the best performers can surpass the superficial mindset of a role and really get into the psyche of the character they are playing, and that's what Ali does here. Every movement, every word that was transcribed was like really well thought out and so well choreographed in her own mind of how she's going to do it. And that's just a testament to how great the performance is. I mean, the fact that we're still getting as much information from Alison's character as much as someone who's speaking just by her own expressions is quite impressive. Really well acted from the actress here. Yeah, she does really well on taking her own initiatives with like the complexion subtleties and just little small individual movements that she does for the character's face, eyes, whatever it may be, which a lot of actors would do or would think of doing, especially if they're not at a high level. I mean, I don't know if the face twitching was in the script, like for it to do that, but if that was like a bit of an ad lib from her, then that is some really good foresight and really good thinking overall for a character like this. Like when you study the character, it just makes sense that she would do that. So yeah, absolutely exceptional from her and exceptional from him. And that's pretty much really the standard performances. I don't think anybody necessarily did bad, but I think these characters required the most effort in the performances, and they absolutely nailed what was required of them. So they had to get a quick shout out from me there. Now let's get into the review itself. Now I understand this movie is beloved in pop culture when it comes to these types of coming-of-age teen drama movies, but this film, Subbed Up, really tries to do a lot, it tries to say a lot, but it doesn't really convey its message in a really good way. It tries to deliver it and give you like a wholesome message at the end and a wholesome conclusion at the end, but the way they gift wrap it and present it makes it just fall completely on its face. But anyway, I think although despite that, you've got, the characters who are, your typical American school archetypes at their base level, but they all have deeper meanings. So there's a twist on these characters. And that's kind of the saving grace for this film from being, a complete and utter catastrophe. They've all got something likable and unique to them. John, who's your school hard nut, your bully, his mother and father abuse him. You've got Claire, who's the popular girl. Her parents use her to get back at each other. You've got Allison, who's the quiet one. Her parents neglect her and emotionally abuse her. You've got Brian, who's the typical nerd character, or the smart character, whatever you want to say. His parents always pressure him to always achieve constantly. You've got Andrew, who's the sporty jock type, but he's neglected by his father. So, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to give you the issues now, and I'm going to give you what's good, and then I'm going to give you my final conclusion of the film. First, let's get into the issues, and there is a hell of a lot of issues in this film, and I mean a hell of a lot. The film is crippled by its issues. So, although this film has like some really good ideas in terms of, all these characters being brought together who are, different character types, but they all have something in common that brings them all together as one and make them see that they can bond over stuff and make them see that they've got more in common than they think. So although they have an overarching connection, which is obviously the fact that they all have issues with the parents, the film does a really bad job in showing you how they get to this place of sharing this type of information with each other. Because if you're going to share something like that, you need people you can trust, and there's not really a formation of how this comes to be with each other. It seems that the movie has like a preset end goal and it wants to get there without really telling you what's in the middle. For example, let me talk about Andrew and Allison. They have one scene together. They are, walk to the cafeteria to get some food, and they talk about vodka and some really small talk, boring stuff. Then after that, for some reason, Allison feels secure and comfortable enough to share her terrible home life with Andrew, who she's had one conversation with, and it doesn't warrant her revealing this type of information in any sort of way. Now, of course, yeah, they've been hanging out as a group, but even then, because Allison doesn't really say much, and Andrew and her have not really had any interaction in class, full stop, it still is, it's still completely out of nowhere. And it's just abrupt in every single way possible. And by the way, I should mention that they actually end up together at the end of the movie for some reason. And that's the entirety of their scenes. They have the scene walk to the cafeteria. They have Allison talk about, how bad her home life is to Andrew. And he's like, oh yeah, me too. And then at the end of the film, even though showing no romantic interest in Andrew and vice versa, they end up together at the end of the film. But that's like another issue. I'm going to get into that. That's a whole other entire fucking bombshell of this movie, but we'll get into that in a minute. So other than that, right, you've got John and Andrew becoming friends for absolutely no reason. Nothing has changed between them from the beginning of the film, where they had a fight and John pulled a knife on Andrew, but for some reason they're close enough to laugh with each other at the end of the movie. I don't understand that. Andrew laughs at some comments as well that John makes in class, despite being literally threatened with a lethal weapon. I mean, for one, it's not realistic how they would move on so quickly. It's not like a type of situation where you can laugh about it later without exactly talking about it and breaking down issues with the situation before you patch things back up again. Like the fact they would go through this and then you have like Andrew laughing at John's jokes and stuff like that, and then laughing with each other at the end. It's just not realistic. It's just not how humans would behave. So that's just an issue there. So John, Claire and Brian and their scenes start talking, and then Brian reveals that he doesn't want to reveal that he's a virgin near Claire. Like, he doesn't really say why, he doesn't really explain why, it just happens. I don't know what I'm supposed to say about these type of interactions.
It's not like he shows any romantic interest in her either, so it can be because of that. Maybe it's because she's a girl, but I don't know, it's just, for me, it's just not made very clear why.
And by the way, another issue with this scene is that it just comes from out of absolutely nowhere. It's just complete random non sequitur. Now, if there was a build-up between these three to justify this scene, then sure, yeah, it makes sense. And for people who are saying, oh well, they don't have to be friends to talk about this type of stuff. I mean, okay, but I still think there's a more organic and natural way to bring up the conversation. It just seems like this was thrown into the mix for absolutely no reason. It's only based on the fact that, oh well, these are the type of conversations that teenagers have, so we have to have a conversation about this somehow and some way. It's like, okay, I mean, maybe, yeah, if that's the type of, movie you want to sell, sure, but there's also ways to do it and make it mean something.
Or make it natural.
This kind of just feels so out of place. And once again, I keep going back to that thing of build-up, like, not a lot of people would be so freely talking about the things that these teenagers are talking about. Tell me why. Show me why. Like, just because the teenagers doesn't mean that the natural conversation that they are first going to gravitate towards is something like this, you know?
I mean, it's a personal thing for anybody, and I mean, these kids have just met each other, so why are they heading down that road straight away?
But yeah, anyway. So another issue. The film likes to tell us that the relationship between these five is stone, it's ironclad. You know, they're sharing stories with each other, they're dancing with each other, they're getting high with each other, they're laughing with each other. But it doesn't really do anything to explain how they got to this place of comfortability and inseparability. Sure, there are moments where they seem to enjoy one another's company, and sure, there's reasons why they have things in common, but the ladder leading up to it is just non-existent. There's nothing really to truly grip these characters together. There's nothing really that just says, that is the exact moment where these guys become friends. You know what I mean? Like, that's the moment that these guys become best friends, which the movie tries to sell to you and tries to tell you that they are. I mean, I just don't see it. I really don't see it. There's not enough scenes of them talking about, like, everyday life, you know, mutual interest, things they do in their off time. Hell, I even think this film could benefit on just about anything that means making them have more in common with each other, because what they do have in common, for some characters, it kind of connects them as a group, but for the most part, the connections is pretty bare bones, or for some characters, you can kind of alienate them. So I don't think it's crazy with me saying that. Like, a friendship is not based on one thing; it's based on multiple aspects in terms of how compatible you are in a lot of different ways. Not just one small thing. So, like, in general, on a one-on-one basis, anything that puts these characters together is pretty one-dimensional, or at points not even existent between particular characters. As a group, maybe, but that's just one thing, and all the rest you can think of for them as a group, like, oh, well, they're in the same school, that's barely worth mentioning. You know, that's a minor factor. That's not as big as, like, a personal factor of why they're together, like, you know, the parent stuff. So yeah, they need more of that to really pad everything out about each individual relationship, and as a group as well as a whole. Like, you don't just go from, oh yes, I met you on the first day, I'm going to tell you about, you know, how my dad abuses me. No, you talk, like, you build up to that. You build up to that point of, you know, loyalty, of trust in each other to reveal that information, and once you're comfortable enough, you reveal it. In this film, it's just, oh God, let's just have him say that his dad, you know, hits him around the head. It just, you know what I mean? It doesn't really say how it got there, why he said it. You know, it just kind of blurted out most of the time. But let's say we wanted to put that at the side and focus on what they do talk about in each individual scene. My judgment in what should have featured in the scenes might be wrong. At least they are talking and you know, doing stuff, you know, in a positive fashion. See, you would think that, right? But no, not in this movie. And God, this is just the kill shot of this entire movie. The stuff that is interfaced with these types of scenes, like arguments, sometimes really volatile, insulting scenes with particular characters, that makes you even less convinced that these guys could be friends, because they go from arguing really badly insulting, sometimes even making each other cry and self-loathe. And then they go from dancing with each other to smoking drugs with each other to laughing with each other. It's like, what? Like, I could understand if you're doing that to, like, build them as different at the start. Like, oh, these 5 different archetypes, how do we get them from point A, which is the beginning, to point B, which is like, oh, we have more in common than we think. We've got this in common, we've got this in common, we've got this in common, this in common. They don't get to that stage. It's just, we're going to go at point A, and then we're going to go at point B without even
making a journey. We're just going to teleport.
It doesn't matter how strong the positives are in any film, and I will say this film's positives are very lackluster, but still, even in a film with the strongest of positives, it's not going to make the negatives any less impactful, especially in the context of these specific negatives. Especially when this film is heavily reliant on its characters. So when you're jumping back and forth on each character in their overall demeanour, it just seems that scene by scene, characters just factory reset. They don't seem to hang on nor remember any of the altercations between themselves and others at certain points, which in my opinion makes it quite difficult to have like an extreme emotional attachment. Like with the scenes that the script actually remembers, like John's reveal of his abuse. Like, yeah, okay, I can have an emotional connection there because it's sad. But in terms of the overall synopsis in a scene on what's conversed 95% of the time, you know, it's difficult because it's erased. Why should I feel for a character in one scene who's not going to remember it in the next scene? So take the biggest example of this, which is Claire and John. So this man harasses her, he degrades her, he sexually assaulted her, he deduces her issues with her parents as being a spoilt rich kid. By the way, in which after she like bawls her eyes out, like she's like crying, she's really distraught by it, she's screaming, telling him to stop with like, it's like every bit of fight she has left in her body because she's so upset. And then after that scene, after that very scene, she's dancing. You know, she starts dancing with Alison, and she's like dancing on her own. Like she's proper going for it. It makes zero sense. It's like how you get from one major emotion to another major emotion. It just never explained. It just happens. After she does that, she personally seeks out John, right? And these two get together,
which is just absolutely insane. But it's kind of justified because the reason that she wants to date John is because she wants to get back at her parents for the way her parents treat her, and obviously it's a bad choice because she knows that they won't approve of her choice in partner. I think the issue with this, apart from the obvious stuff, is we don't really know enough about the parents and how they use her to manipulate each other. Maybe if we knew about that, then this would be more justified as an action, but the action itself is absolutely crazy because of obviously how Bender treats Claire. Like, this man had her screeching and crying for him to stop insulting her. This man literally sexually assaulted her. Like, all those horrible feelings that she went through were real. Like, is it really worth putting all those to decide to spite your parents? I mean, just because John's getting abused and all this type of stuff doesn't mean that he's not done horrible things throughout this movie, and it doesn't mean that he's won't do horrible things again, especially to Claire. So I don't understand why she would make that decision. I mean, really, do her parents treat her worse than what Bender does in this movie? Because I can't see it. I just don't know. It would help if the movie showed that kind of side of her where she is sort of vengeful and all that, but it doesn't. She's just not depicted in that way. I don't know, it just kind of leaves you scratching your head.
In this film, it just genuinely makes no sense. He berates everyone, he insults them, he has absolutely no reform in any part of his character during the movie. And it's strange, right, because I do like him in this film, but that's because I feel sorry for him. I can understand why he is the way he is, because there is a specific scene where obviously he talks about his abuse that you could be like, oh, that's sad, you know what I mean? And the reason why he acts the way he does, you know, you could read between the lines and be like, he shows assertion at school where he doesn't have the assertion at home, etc., right? So I can like him for that, and I like his character for that. What doesn't make sense is how there's no reform in that. There's no fact that, okay, well, just because, although I've just said what I've just said, right? Although he does that, doesn't mean that it's okay that he continues that behaviour. It doesn't mean that the film shouldn't change that behaviour and make him realise, I can't keep doing this. Like, I shouldn't take out what problems I have at home out on the people at school, sort of thing. But the film and the characters in general just let him do it without any consequence.
Why would they want to talk and be friends with him, you know, after the way he treats them?
And, you know, he gets away with that, and that's the whole way through the movie. I mean, sure, Andrew says stuff about it, like he confronts him, he argues with him, but John doesn't really feel any remorse, and although he confronts him and tells him about it, it's not exactly a change or development in the way his actions are done. In John's case, it's just sort of, you know, John says something nasty, Andrew confronts him, John keeps saying stuff that's nasty, and then Andrew will confront him again. It's just a repetitive cycle that is just never ending. And it's yet another wound in this movie.
And don't forget, in between those scenes where, you know, John's being nasty and Andrew's confronting him, usually they're laughing with each other, talking with each other, joining in with each other on certain activities or whatever it may be within the scene, with absolutely no resolvement of anything. It's as if Andrew completely forgot that he had a confrontation with John in a previous scene, for example.
Andrew being clearly a more obvious fit for Claire, considering, you know, he defends her throughout the entire fucking movie from John, verbally and physically. They seem to have a relationship outside of this, like, detention group as well, away from the rest of the group and before they even meet the rest of the group. But yeah, they don't get together. That's obviously a major issue because, you know, Andrew's been there for Claire. John is just non-existent in terms of being there for Claire. Like, he is just abusive, he's nasty, he's He shows absolutely no consideration, no love for Claire whatsoever. Andrew does. Andrew always does. He constantly defends her. He sticks his neck out. He even wanted to fight John to stick up for Claire, and yet they don't get together at the end of the movie. I mean, fuck me. There's also an issue with everyone whistling with John in unison, despite literally having arguments with him. Claire in particular, after the uncomfortable interaction about with John, and I'm not going to repeat the interaction because it's just uncomfortable, but let's just say John got really descriptive about some acts. Here's another one. The teacher threatening to punch a student, trapping him, literally kidnapping him in a locker, and nothing stemming from it whatsoever. Not even a reveal from John to the other classmates. It just happens. No confrontation, no showdown between John and the teacher, no life lesson. Absolutely nothing at all. It's just forgotten. So why the fuck do they include it? How are you going to have such a big, major rising action like that
and have nothing come from it?
Now, the only time after that scene that the teacher interacts with the students is like one scene which is pretty minor, which there's no point even mentioning in the description of that scene. There's like an essay at the end wrote to the teacher about those words on who they think they are, and then Brian writes one essay from the five of them about no matter who they see themselves as, you're only going to see them, the teacher that is, how you want to see them. You know, that's kind of the only interaction they have, which what does that do for that part of the subplot? That's such a huge plot, though. How are you going to leave something like that open? It just didn't really have a purpose. I mean, I guess he has a scene
with the caretaker.
Anyway, they have a convo together about caring for the students and stuff like that, and him just being angry because the students are disrespecting him. So the only way that he thinks he can solve it is just by laying down the authority that he has. And then, like, you know, the caretaker's like, well, that's your issue. It's that you're too hard on the students. Like, you don't actually hear them out. You don't understand them. Whatever. That's why they treat you the way they do. That's why they don't like you. And then, yeah, there's just nothing that comes for it. It feels pointless. So I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that scene. I don't know if I'm supposed to like the teacher now, but I don't know how the fuck. For one, I don't know how the fuck I'm supposed to like a teacher who kidnaps children. We had the incident, we had the epiphany, but we didn't have any reveal. Not only is John getting abused by his parents, but now he's casually getting abused by his teacher as well. And the movie sort of spits on the teacher's abuse because they try to justify it in that caretaker scene, which just doesn't work. I mean, although he shows remorse for his actions in that scene with the caretaker, he doesn't have any scenes with the students to rectify it in any way. You look at how terrified John was in that scene, and then you think about the fact that he helped write the essay to the teacher. Also, he was like, he's threatening him, saying that, you know, no one's going to touch me. Who would believe a punk like you and a teacher of my caliber like me? You know what I mean? Everyone's going to believe me. Everyone's going to believe the teacher rather than the student in this case. I can do whatever I want to you and no one's going to say a word, no one's going to believe you, you know what I mean? And of course he doesn't hit him, which I guess, you know, well done teacher. And there's no big blow up from John after that. I mean, he seemed pretty distraught. Does the teacher not deserve to get called out on these actions? Is it okay for him to behave like this? Epiphany or not, should he not still be punished for these actions?
Where's the moral there?
Why are we opening up so many questions without any answers here? It's so fucking stupid and pointless. So you've also got Alison stealing John's knife during the John and Andrew fight scene, where John gets out the knife and then like stabs it in the backrest of the chair. And then, you know, during the scene where he's talking, and by the way, right next to John on his left, there's the chair, the empty chair, and then you've got Alison there. Alison manages to steal the knife either without anybody noticing or at least anybody mentioning it.
It's never mentioned again and it's never called back to.
As well as doing that, she also steals John's lock off his locker, which absolutely has no consequence to the movie.
Just a running theme in this movie, it seems. I mean, that's like the fourth or fifth thing at this point. I mean, I shouldn't even be surprised.
So, let's get into the caretaker in this movie. So, we have the caretaker, and he says to the students that he sees all their letters, what's in their lockers, and that has absolutely no development either. I thought maybe that would play into some sort of story, some sort of plot, some sort of anything, because why mention it if you're going to do nothing with it? I don't know, but this movie does. So he does this, and then the scene with the teacher when he's raiding the personal student files, which apparently is not anything to mention from the caretaker. He just says, oh, you're doing that? That's fair enough, you know. I guess it's just one of those days where you just read personal student information. One thing I forgot to mention is that Claire tracks down John at the end of the film, right? And somehow she gets a key to unlock the door that he would have been locked in, right?
I completely forgot to mention that the teacher also locks John in the closet of the school, and like before he locks him in, he has just a complete and utter verbal assassination of John, and he basically says that he makes 31 grand a year, he has a house, and he's not going to waste all on a punk like John. But when it comes down to it in the future, and John's life is falling apart, he's going to be there, and he's going to knock his dick in the dirt, quote unquote. He's going to beat the shit out of him. He basically then goes on to say, "Oh, John, you think you're a tough guy? Why don't you try and hit me? I'll give you the first shot." John doesn't, as he recoils and he is terrified. And I'll get more into that, the positives of this movie. But anyway, after that scene, the teacher walks out and he does various tasks throughout the day and doesn't check back on Bender. And he's left there for an extensive amount of time because there's a lot of moments in the film after this. And what I'm confused about is that after all of this, right? After all of this, he doesn't come back and check on him. Like, what about like food and water and stuff like that? He just leaves him there. It's such a dark scene, but also it doesn't really make sense because wouldn't he want to check back on John to make sure he's still there? Which, by the way, obviously he isn't there because he escapes through the top of the tiles in the top of the ceiling of the room that he's in and manages to make it back to the Breakfast Club room with the rest of the group. Of which the teacher isn't there, by the way, because the teacher doesn't show up back to the classroom until the end of the movie. As he's doing various things, obviously with the caretaker and with the looking at the files and all that type of stuff. Anyway, at the end of the film, obviously he has to go back there because he's like, oh shit, the teacher's going to be trying to unlock me at the end of the day. That happens, but Claire obviously unlocks the room somehow, kisses John, and then they walk out together. Which doesn't really make any sense because no one saw Bender come out from the tiles. No one knows that Bender was actually locked in the closet by the teacher. So why would she know that Bender crawled through the tiles to go back to the closet so that she knew to then go back to the closet and then get the key, which I don't know where the hell she got the key from, but she somehow unlocked the door. She then obviously goes to the door, unlocks it, and then obviously sees Bender in there, which she knew Bender was in there, by the way. I mean, like, if you want to go back to the teacher, like, after the caretaker stuff, the next scene we see him in is obviously his last scene at the end of the movie where, you know, he reads the essay written by the five of them. By the way, the class is empty at that point as well. Everyone has gone home. So wouldn't he won't be worried about Bender? Wouldn't he want to free Bender? Is that not on his mind? Clearly not. Would it not make him worried as well that Bender is actually in the essay? And how could Bender be in the essay when he's been locked in the closet? Just so many questionable things. You could tell the movie's trying to say, like, you know, always be yourself, you know, be comfortable in yourself, and, you know, don't change for anybody, that type of thing, which is a whole issue in itself because, like, you look at how Alison, right, at the end of the movie she gets a makeover from Claire and Andrew has no interest in her until she gets that makeover. So on one hand the film is saying be confident in who you are, don't change for anybody, but it also says that if you change your look and get makeovers and be conventionally attractive, then boys will like you. Let's get into the score, the music in this film. So sometimes the music just doesn't fit the scene that it's projecting at us, especially when they're picking who goes to the canteen. There's like a weird drum beat. That was just strange. I can't obviously replay it now because of copyright, but just check out the scene if you can on YouTube. Or when like the teacher is handing out detentions to Bender, you know, there was like a weird snare drum. It was like a steel drum sounding looking thing. It was weird. Again, it just takes you out of the moment. It breaks my suspense in disbelief. Next you've got Brian talking about wanting to kill himself with a flare gun and the rest of the group laughing at him, including John, who says to Claire it's not a nice thing to do to someone when she talks about blanking the others if they ever saw each other in the halls on Monday. So Claire's bad for wanting to do that, but it's okay to laugh at Brian, just, you know, talking about wanting to kill himself. How does that make any sense? How is that okay but that isn't? Right, so let's talk about how the script handles Brian then. You know, he wants to be included, he wants to be accepted, he doesn't want to feel any pressure anymore, he wants that sort of validation, which is like, I guess he's like, that's sort of his whole arc in this movie, but although he seeks it, he doesn't really come, I don't think. Like, usually someone's bullying him and laughing at him, the other group loves to take advantage of Brian, like when they made him write the essay at the end, for example, or trivialise his feeling, like I previously mentioned.
with, you know, the flare gun and stuff like that. You know, although, yeah, I guess it is a silly way to try and commit suicide. It's still a man or a boy wanting to commit suicide, you know? So like I said, you know, he does all that, like he writes the essay, you know, he does all this other stuff. It could be to be accepted by the group, who he is, I guess, like, yo, okay, he doesn't have the pressure of, like, being the group wanting him to overachieve and achieve, but he is the smart guy, the brainiac in the group, so that's how he's accepted. He's accepted for the very fine edge of who he is, which, again, that's not them accepting him, that's just them using him to their advantage, in my opinion. You know, if the scene of them accepting him contains, you know, him doing a favour for the group, that just seems like they're taking advantage of him and not accepting him for who he is without something in return on their side. I think if you want to sell that at the end better, you should have a scene where it contains Brian doesn't think it's good enough, like he does something for the group and he doesn't think it's good enough, I should be doing better. Just have a scene in general where he just confronts that issue at the root of his character with the overachieving thing and how his parents have been treating him, and just have the group be like, no, you know, you don't have to be someone else, you don't have to outdo yourself, your best is enough. That's the proper acceptance of him as a character, as a friend, right? Feels like they never have that jumping point, they never have that turning point, and it's sad. Really, it's a waste of a character, and I like Brian because he's really funny in the film. He's got really good banter. He's definitely like he's a great comedic relief character. He's definitely good in the scenes where everyone's arguing. Because the scenes where they're arguing is bad. I hate them because it just, you know, it sort of ruins all the goodwill they're trying to build up between characters. It's still good to see Brian in those scenes making jokes and making you laugh. It's a really nice distraction when those types of scenes in this movie get too much. So yeah, his whole character arc is just ruined. I mean, he wants to be accepted for who he is, and he wants to fit in. That's kind of what we get from his character, right? Does he do that? Does he do any of those things? The film loosely likes to say he does, but there's not really a scene of them saying anything that he does is good enough, and I think that should have been really honed in on. And there are scenes, I guess, as well between parts of the cast where he does fit in, and he does seem like he does fit in, but that's just not enough on its own, and when you consider it's normally off the back of him being bullied or outcasted, then it's just a whole other issue in itself. How the group really treats each other throughout this film is really hit and miss. Sometimes they can bond, they can be very close, but sometimes they can genuinely not like each other and, like, argue really badly or be aggressive with one another really badly, insult each other really badly, like I've mentioned before. Like, you've got Alison and Claire, you've got Claire and John, you've got Andrew and Brian. So with Alison and Claire, like, there's the scene where Alison faked losing her virginity so Claire would reveal if she had lost her virginity in front of the group. The film wants to tell you that's a massive scene, but she's already mentioned to the group when she was talking to John that she's not lost her virginity. Obviously, Claire and John I've mentioned tons of times, I guess. You know what, but between them and then Andrew and Brian, I mean, throughout the entirety of this movie, Andrew threatens Brian to, like, beat him up and stuff like that for asking questions in the hall, for one. No, sure, I mean, obviously after that they seem fine, but that's because this film has amnesia. It still happened, you know, previously without any scene rectifying it. He threatens to beat him up and then they're, like, friendly in another scene, but that's because this film has a tendency to do that, no matter who it is, without any repercussion. So let's talk about another issue. The reason why they can't be friends at school, you know, the reason they can't be friends on Monday after this detention session on Saturday. Let's just say it how it is. It doesn't work. It's baseless. It's shallow in a lot of ways. It's just entirely sparse in every sense of the word. Let's just break it down, right? If their bond was as close as the film is trying to tell us and wants us to believe, why can't they drop their status in wherever they rank in the school social climate and hang out as friends? Like, that's how they generally feel about one another, and they generally like each other, and they care for one another, and blah blah blah, right? Why is them and where they rank and what friends they have stopping them from being friends? You replace old friends for your new better friends. And by the way, these new better friends, as the script wants us to believe, they are better. They care for them not as what they perceive themselves to be, but actually with who they are. Underneath that, they've got more in common. They've got issues that they share and try and bond with each other on. Like, don't give me all this bullshit about they can't do it because the school life is just so complicated, guys. It's not complicated. You've got, a lot more happy and a lot more trusting and a lot more stronger relationship. Right, let's talk about Alison eating the sugar sandwiches. I want to talk about this because mainly I just don't understand. Like, I understand that she's an outcast, she struggles, she's strange, of course, she's weird, got really bad communication. That doesn't mean she necessarily eats strange food combos like that, right? Which is sugar sandwiches and crisp. Like, those food combinations are strange, but just because she is strange doesn't mean that's where you would go because you are strange. This guy's a little bit weird, yeah, that means he must eat sugar sandwiches, you know? It doesn't work like that, does it? Tell us why the film doesn't. That's another one of the issues the film has.
I guess the only reason I could think of why she does it is because, obviously, the issue that she has with her parents is that they don't really pay attention to her, they don't really care about her, and she probably does that maybe to get attention from others. And to be fair, she does have a tendency of saying stuff that are complete lies for attention. So, you know what? Maybe I'm wrong on this. I don't know, but anyway.
You've got the tone imbalances in the film, which are very, very common. At the end of the film, you've got the therapy session between the group. It's like a focus group. They all start to talk about the reasons why they're in detention. When Andrew's reasons come up, he says that the reason that he's in detention is because he taped the butt cheeks of a guy together while delivering it as a really serious monologue. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You can't have him say something like that when the basis of why he's being serious is because he fucking taped someone's clappers together.
Andrew basically did this because he wanted to seek approval from his father, as his father has mentioned to him a bunch of times that he used to have wild times in high school. What doesn't make sense to me is that the action is so far removed from that statement, from that notion. They don't correspond with each other. And I understand that we don't really know the extent of, obviously, Andrew and his dad's relationship and all that, but that's the problem. Obviously, what Andrew did is such an insane thing. Like, not a regular person would decide to do that. Like, I don't understand why Andrew would think this is a good idea. Like, why would that appeal to his dad's sensibilities? Like, what did his dad do in high school that's something he would approve of, you know what I'm saying? And I think that's what it comes down to with Andrew, as, you know, Andrew's whole arc is, it's a lack of understanding, at least from me. It just sounds like a situation that's not simple and it's more complicated and we need more information to get the same understanding for him as we do with the others. But of course we don't get that. He's a story without an ending. I just don't understand why he was made to deliver that line seriously when the subject of his issues with his parents is so goofy. I just don't know how any script writer could possibly think that would have worked. This is a scene where everyone is sharing the issues with their parents as well, and for the most part it's quite earnest. So why throw that in without a desperate explanation of why? If you still want to keep the funny scene of the confession, then keep it, but then make him explain and make it become really, really grave, because this just alienates him. Although with the others, although some characters' issues with the parents can be quite vague, there's enough to put them in the bracket with the rest. So your whole biggest reason as to why these guys are together, and the whole precipice of the formation of the movie, is missing its fifth character. And like I've said, because obviously the scenes are so randomly generated and nothing really seems to stick, and the fact that we have very little pleasantries being exchanged, that it seems pointless him being there. I can't think of a single thing that he actually has in common with them. Never has there been a bigger stranger in a movie that is aimed to be about togetherness.
But let's move on. I mean, if we want to get into, like, technicalities here about issues with the film, if Brian is supposed to be intelligent, then why is he planning his suicide with a flare gun? Can we address that? Like, I'm not saying Brian here should, want to kill himself, but if he's going to do it, then how is that the most practical way to do it?
What about, like, a knife, or if you can get a gun, or pills, or anything like that? Like, why would he not consider that? And I can understand maybe he's just not thinking straight because he's so beaten down with the issues of his parents, but I think the issue is that throughout the movie that doesn't really seem to be affiliated with that possibility.
So the reveals of, like, the abuse at the end with what the characters are facing, does it feel like it has any payoff? Like, I would like to hear more. I'd love to see solutions. I would love to see, advice.
And I understand that the Breakfast Club believes that adults don't want to take their issues seriously, which is maybe why you might not get solutions. But what I don't understand is that we've not been told anything as an example as to why they believe that adults don't want to take their issues seriously. Have they spoke to anyone about it? Have they shared it non-stop to adults that they know and they've just not cared and not took it seriously? I don't know, I would like to understand why they have this belief.
And of course, the scene itself is terrible.
It's just because they're all just blankly sharing the issues with their parents, and they don't really advise each other on how to sort of make life better for themselves. And I think that would have been nice. I think that would have given extra wrinkle to the story and the whole scene itself and their friendship, showing that, oh, okay, although they're all going through a very difficult situation, they empathise with each other's situations. They still care enough to want to make each other feel better.
So let's talk about like the whole ending of this film with the scene with Claire and Brian where Claire says that on Monday they're not going to be friends. And then for some reason you have Claire and John and then Alison and Andrew getting together. If that's not what's going to happen, if they're not going to be friends on Monday, then why are they having a relationship? Is it just a weekend relationship? Is this a court-ordered fling? What's going on here? Let's talk about Claire's whole characterization and her whole build-up as being like this spoilt popular girl, right? Like everything about this part of her character, I guess this her whole identification really in this movie, the whole of that is just completely and utterly without merit in every single way possible. No, sure, right? There's a scene where she's like smoking weed with the group and then she just randomly, for no reason whatsoever, says how awesome and popular she is. Which comes across entirely forced and unnatural as dialogue.
As before and after that scene, she doesn't behave like that at all. So the movie wants to type her as this self-obsessed, snidey, up herself popular girl without making her act that way. It just seems that she just blurted it out to remind the audience, oh yeah, by the way, this is what she's supposed to be. But meanwhile, the script isn't faithful to that.
Again, there's that one scene. And then I guess Brian pointed out that she's sort of self-conceited, but there's nothing really to tell us that. Like, everything about her is quite the opposite, mostly. For the most part, in these scenes, she's really reserved, she's selfless, she's passive. I mean, look at when John is trying to provoke Andrew, she says to ignore him to Andrew.
Yep, that's a selfish popular girl looking out for others. She only is ever nasty when John is nasty with her. And of course, she's not starting it, it's him who's starting it. She doesn't harshly judge anybody, she doesn't make fun of anybody, she doesn't call anybody names. Even Alison, who's obviously very strange, she's very likeable and she's very nice. She doesn't pick on anybody because they're not like her.
She also kind of just speaks when spoken to. She's definitely in no way this sort of toxic sludge that John really pins her down as. Which is just fucking piss poor from the writers again. If it's not to do with the writers, it could be to do with the way interaction with John goes with Claire. And during that interaction about the activities club, which I'm going to read later, it kind of gives you the impression that John's hatred towards her is sort of a preconceived notion of a image that is conjured up in his head about a typical activities girl.
So I guess maybe it's based off a stereotype that he's created in his head. So he just hates her without even knowing her.
So we have another scene where Andrew says to Claire and John that he doesn't want to get in trouble for them being boneheads. Because they're being loud and argumentative and, you know, he wants to go to his, like, wrestling meeting, basically. So this is a post-production issue rather than a pre-production or production issue, which I've mentioned, which I've already covered for my previous issues with this film. So during when he says that, the quality of his mic changes.
Whatever it was recorded on, it wasn't succinct with the rest of the audio.
It doesn't sound the same, so it takes you out of the moment. It's a big issue. It takes you out of the film. While on the subject of Andrew, let's talk about his scene with John and Claire. This is the scene where John, Claire, and Andrew talk about Claire being in an activities club, and obviously as well Andrew's wrestling. And John begins to argue, and then when Claire argues back, he just falls apart. So at least usually when he's arguing, like, it's at least somewhat well crafted and competent. Like, what he's saying is harsh, but at least there's purpose to what he's doing. Like, he feels like he's taking someone down a peg.
In his own mind.
But this scene, he just looks like a moron. It looks like he's just being obnoxious for no reason. John, well, I'll just run right out and join the wrestling team. Andrew and Claire look at each other and laugh at John. John, maybe the prep club too. Student council, and he says that to Claire. Then Andrew says, no, they wouldn't take you. John says, I'm hurt. Claire says, you know why guys like you knock everything? John, to himself, says, oh, this should be stunning. It's 'cause you're afraid, Claire continues. Then John, with mocking enthusiasm, says, oh God, you bitches are so smart. That's exactly why I'm not heavy into activities. Claire says, you're a big coward. Claire says, see, you're afraid that they won't take you. You don't belong, so you just have to dump all over it. John, well, it wouldn't have anything to do with you activities people being assholes, now would it? Claire says, well, you wouldn't know, you don't even know any of us. I don't know any lepers either, but I'm not going to run out and join one of their fucking clubs.
I think that kind of proves my point as well on the pre-assumptions that John makes and has made about Claire.
That's just him arguing for the sake of arguing. Does it make any sense? Clearly doesn't have a reason, because the reason why he's arguing is based on absolutely no interaction with any of these people he's arguing about and against. Could be a place of jealousy, but still, it just comes across like a fucking idiot. If they added more scenes where John does this often, where he argues for no reason, then it kind of shows that, oh, well, there's more to this than we think. What is the real reason that he's arguing? You know, all that type of stuff, and it makes you think more. But this scene on its own, I don't know what it achieves. Right, now let's get into what's good about this movie, the positives about this movie.
So there's the scene in the closet with John and the teacher. Now, this is a great scene because the facade slips due to the teacher's utter just intimidation and threats and destruction of John. We see the tough guy persona completely dropped, and that's replaced with a terrified, scared little boy. Because obviously the abuse that's being thrown at John is probably what he faces every single day with his parents. Also, the delivery of the line where he goes like, "Are you threatening me?" Again, he just comes across so frail and vulnerable. Obviously the complete opposite to what we see him as, you know, in the classroom. And it's just a great bit of contrast to tell you everything you need to know about Bender. The next scene is the dance scene. Now, although I mentioned previously that it's very off kilter that they're all dancing with each other after arguing, what makes the scene good is the way the characters are dancing and how it really fits in with their characters. You've got John, who dances quite aggressively. Claire dances in a very cool way. Brian, of course, dances like a dog because obviously he's way out of his element. And Alison dances in a very odd way. Andrew dances quite aggressively too, but of course because of the stuff I've said previously, I'm not really sure what to compare the them dances to what type of character he is. But all I can say is he dances quite aggressively like John, so there is that. Also the song and the ensemble dance moves are just really great to look at and listen to. So
Alison, Claire and John are fun to watch. They are interesting characters. Brian I also enjoy for the comedy, like I've previously said. Andrew I don't really care for. I don't dislike him, but there's just not really anything about him that makes him stand out. Alison, Claire and John are really fun to watch. Really interesting characters, compelling on screen. I like everything about them. I like the personalities. I also like how their issues are a part of them, and you can see that shining through despite, you know, what sort of border they pull up, like with John obviously the negative, the bullying and all that, and the jokes and the harassing and all that. Like you can see it's because he's been abused and on all that type of stuff. Like I do like that. I just wish they would have done more with it, but I do like that at its very finest form. John's scene when he starts talking about his abuse and obviously like he role plays his parents after role playing Brian's parents, that was really, really powerful. It really was. It was funny, but it was also at the same time like really moving and sad. I really enjoyed that.
This is probably my favourite scene in the movie, as well as the dancing.
I think obviously Alison as well, as I previously said, really good shift in demeanour. I think she's a really good actress as well. Her line delivery is spot on. Her little action or voice idiosyncrasies are really interesting to just view it from a audience standpoint. She's very interesting in the way she delivers line, the way her body language is. Just a really great character to just embrace on screen.
I think some credit is deserved as well for the actor who played the teacher, and mostly because of the scene with John in the closet. That was a really good scene, really well acted. I think the whole cast can go in the positives of this movie for their performances, of course. I should definitely give praise to the scene as well where they're all doing the therapy session, because there was a lot of shifting emotions there, and the cast pulled it off with absolutely no problem. Yeah, it was really good, especially Brian and Claire, because like they were like crying and then they were laughing and all that type of stuff.
Then despite the movie's issues, nothing really dragged in this film. I was really interested in what happened overall. Yeah, it was really fun on screen, and that's because obviously the characters themselves are just really, really fun to watch. You know, just as individual personalities, I think. I guess aside from Andrew, but even Andrew has his moments, you know, just from a performance point of view, but, you know, that's that. I think pacing was good despite there not really much happening in general in terms of like different location and like, you know, like just being a fast-paced film overall. But yeah, there's always something to pay attention to, and that's because obviously there's always something that grips you. Now, maybe it's because my opinion is heavily impacted on the fact that I've just seen this movie for the first time, and obviously there's a lot of things that are introduced, like I've said, and they go nowhere, and that kept me interested. I'm like, oh, well, there's this teacher incident, there's Alison stealing, you know, stealing stuff. What are they going to do with that? What are they going to do with that? And that obviously didn't happen.
But to be honest, I could watch this film again. I think if I turned my brain off and didn't focus so much on the side of it where it has its issues, and obviously I have to do a review here. I have to measure and critique and analyse this film based on the component of filmmaking, which is why there are so many negatives. And yet there is inherent issues that I will always have a problem with. And of course there's things in the movie that don't work. But its strong elements is still enough to make me say that I would watch it again. I think it really displays what being a teenager is like. Of course, like smoking weed, doing stuff you shouldn't be doing, talking about like feelings and love making. With obviously the added elements that the characters are so relatable and so likable and unconventional with the issues they have going on. I think performative point of views as well, like I've said previously, from the actors. I can still enjoy the movie despite its shortcomings.
I think the concept is good on paper. Like, you've obviously got your 5 different types of school personalities. They all spend one day together in detention. And then, although they seem so different, they realise how similar they are. I think that's really good. I really do like how ambitious the concept is as well. I mean, it's really rewarded for its simplicity. The majority of film is just the characters hanging out, talking in the same room. But I'm interested in what's going on. I care what they have to say. And that's really strong in this movie. I mean, they're all noticeably different, and they're all noticeably different in really good ways. It makes you pay attention. And if only the blanks were filled in on this movie, it could have been really, really good.
Another ambitious thing as well is that obviously the film is shot in one location. It's shot in the school. Of course, at the beginning and the end of the film, it goes outside the school, but for the majority of the movie, it's just inside the school in a handful of locations. Which, if not done in the right way, can obviously back you up in a corner and be very limiting, but this movie pulls it off.
Right, so with all that being said, let's get into my conclusion. Characters individually, pretty strong, although obviously incredibly flawed. Their friendship, burr. Individual pairings, burr. Story, self-destructs. Pace is good because the characters keep you captivated enough to watch. Too many subplots that are introduced but unused and unfinished. Some shots are good, editing is okay at times, but has some really bad moments individually. Tonally, it spins out of control. Development in all regards just non-existent. And that's about it. Overall, I'll probably give this movie 1.5 star out of 5. Characters had individual qualities that were fun. It gets a lot of points for its concept as well, and how well they pulled it off when a lot was against them.
I'm talking about like the location and the fact that the movie's basically just them speaking with each other most of the time.
But it completely sleeps on the fundamentals, and that's what the big issues are. But that is it for my conclusion. That is it for this review. I will see you guys later.